Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Bob Mendelsohn, and this is the Bob's Your Uncle podcast. Wherever you are just now, whether you're out for your evening constitutional, or you're here in Australia or back in the United States with friends, or all by yourself with your headset on, hey, wherever you are, thanks for joining us these 18 minutes. Of note, the opinions are strictly my own and those of my guests.
But I do know that I love you, and I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
On this date in history in 2 AD, Venus and Jupiter were in conjunction. That's a possible astrological explanation for the Star of Bethlehem. In 917 AD, the Battle of Anchialus, the Bulgarian army counterattacks the Byzantines. In 1000 AD, Hungary was established as a Christian kingdom by Stephen I, and it's celebrated today as the State Foundation Day. More recently, 1968, Soviet Union and other Warsaw Pact nations invaded Czechoslovakia to crush the Prague Spring liberalization movement. And in 1858, Charles Darwin's theory of evolution was first published in the Journal of the Proceedings of the Linnean Society, and that's the historical marker of the week.
And I know that if you love me too, what a wonderful world this would be.
Shalom, friends. I am so happy to sit here with you in my last 9 days in the United States and talk with you about what I did on my summer vacation. All right, it wasn't only summer, and it certainly wasn't a vacation. I was at so many places that I actually started listing them just to see if that's really accurate. Yeah, I was at conferences in Orlando, in Denver, outside Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, at Louisville. I used to call it Louisville. I was duly corrected. I spoke in various places, congregations in Pittsburgh and in Orlando, in Knoxville, in Nashville, and west in a little place called Hurricane Mills that Loretta Lynn owns. In Houston, in Kansas City. I visited people. I visited some cousins, first cousins in Pittsburgh and Atlanta that I don't see with any kind of regularity. I visited with my in-laws in Denver and Kansas City, and with my sister there in Kansas City, and a second cousin of ours, and a second cousin once removed. Anyway, the numbers are fun to play with. Visited with friends in Orlando, at the Villages, in Houston, in Kansas City, with ministry colleagues, people who are involved in Jewish work like I am and have been for decades. So it was really great to see friends in San Francisco, in New Jersey, in Houston and Pennsylvania. All this litanizing, this list of things and people, each one, I mean, I could just write down that guy and spent 2 hours with him. And that cousin, we spent days together. Well, each of these means a whole lot to me. And as I fade, I try not to think about that, but as I continue in my last quarter of my life, people become much more important than things. And whether it's a conference or a speaking engagement or visiting or pickleball, well, that's always important. Whatever I'm doing, I want to do it with others. I stopped in this morning at the church across the street from where we live here in Nashville and spent some really good time with some beautiful people who are on staff there. And they asked me, what can we pray for you? Wow, that is the most beautiful solicitation that someone could ever make. So, of course, my first thoughts are, please pray for my family, pray for us to be who we need to be as humans, as kind people, as successful people. Make sure that we're relating well with each other and then with those outside us. But I was thinking in this business of pickleball, I'd put on my T-shirt, my Pickleball Australia or Pickleball Sydney. I have all kinds of pickleball shirts from around the globe. I didn't buy a new one this time. There's a opportunity missed. But I was thinking about the relationships that God has given me with real people globally. I played in Scotland. I played pickleball in Istanbul, in Warsaw. It's amazing. All over the U.S. I played, I think, in every city where I've been this summer. I mean, sometimes I had to drive 10 miles, but that's nothing, to get some good games. It's a funny thing. You carry your paddle and you get to a court and you stand there and people are in twos or fours. They've already determined to be there except for open play. And they look over and say, oh, here's a straggler. Wonder if he's any good. Wonder if he'll play. Hey, buddy, you want to play? And they rotate you in, and then you get some good games in. I love that esprit de corps, that business of how we relate to one another on the pickleball court. Nobody's too good, nobody's too bad to be excluded or included. I played in a club, indoor, beautiful club in Atlanta, in Atlanta's north, with my cousin and her husband, and that was just a real joy to be there. And people kept coming by, obviously wanting to join in because there were only 3 of us on a court for 4. There's something about welcome that is important in the pickleball community, and I think it's important in the neighborhood, even as the staff across the street at the church said this morning, or the lunch I had with some ministry colleagues in Kansas City, and time going out to the K, that's the Kauffman Stadium where the Royals beat the Boston Red Sox on Jewish Heritage Night. Yes, I even did get a shirt there. It says the word Royals in Hebrew letters. Not that there's anything Jewish about the Kansas City Royals, but it was a fun night with hundreds and hundreds of other Jewish people, or people who love Jews anyway. All that to say this, that people are what matters. Do you remember in the Muppet movie when that diner owner was challenged with some kind of problem and he said, look, people's is people's. When I travel the world, I keep thinking that same thing. Wherever I go, there's both me and them, and these are people. And people is what makes a village. People is what makes a neighborhood. Oh, there's some beautiful scenery. I mean, beautiful. When I was in Knoxville, I saw the hills and what they might call mountains at the Piedmont there, the end of the Appalachians. It's beauty. And driving through the countryside and seeing the stunning beauty that God made, the clouds and the rolling thunder the lightning as it crashes. I don't want to be driving in it, but to see that, to see beautiful sunrises and sunsets and lakes and rivers, I see all that and I think this is great. But the real connection is between me and God, between God and me, and then the people that God gives me to share with. Boy, I don't want to take that lightly. So when I started to list all these things that I did this summer and thinking about prayers and that we're all the same, I realized that every one of you who's listening to the Bob's Your Uncle podcast today, on the 20th of August, every one of you is a mensch, a human, a really good human. And I so appreciate who you are. Some of you write to me. Some of you want me to talk about various things. I do. Next week I'll have a guest again. I just wanted to wrap up this summer season. I got here middle of April. I was at a conference in New Jersey and then over in New York City and met some people there and worked together. It's just been a great season of my life. My wife and I are here with our 5 grandkids and having a fantastic time in that regard. So humanly speaking, it's been refreshing. Spiritually speaking, it's been refreshing. I'm reading and finding books of always a joy. Even a book I'm currently reading by a political candidate with whom I have nothing to do, but might as well. It somehow found its way into my library. I'm going to keep reading it and see what he has to say. There's so much we can learn, and the best way I know how to learn is to listen to all those who are in my Sunday school class across the street or who are helping me become the kind of person I want to be. Who is helping you become the person you want to be? Are you hanging out with people in your neighborhood or at your congregation who are speaking into you words of life? Or are you hanging out with people who are naysayers and critical folk? Stay away from them. We don't have time to be wrapped up in hostility. Let the others be offended. Don't take up another person's offense. Let's see what we can do to make the world, well, like we say, a better place. The last couple weeks I've had Danya Greenberg and Michelle Beadle, 2 beautiful ladies I hung out with in conferences in Orlando. And I think about the relationships that God has given me. I flash back on those in Orlando or in Pennsylvania at the Messiah Conference or in Denver at the LCJE. People I've known for so many years, and how great it is that God gives me renewal with them, with you, and with Himself, so that we can be, so that we can honestly be His people in this dark and honestly darkening world. The world is getting worse. Sin is amplifying, selfishness is amplifying, borders are getting increasingly severer, and what's going to change? Who's going to change? Has to come from our insides, doesn't it? Well, that's what I'm picking up this summer and this spring and summer. Trusting in God. He makes the world better for His glory. I don't always feel better. My legs don't always operate as well as they once did. There will be a day when I'll get a new body and a new mind, new spirit, new all that. But in the meantime, I'm going to keep leaning into Him, learning about Him, and trying to be His kind of person in this world. How are you doing in that regard? Why don't you write me and tell me, hey, Bob, I'm thinking about what you said, and I need some help in that regard. Let's keep processing this, not just on Instagram and Facebook, but in real life as well. All right, I'll talk to you next week. Let's close the program with some of our regular activities. Every week on the podcast, we read from the number one bestseller of all time. Yeah, it's the Bible. And today's no different. We're going to read from Paul's letter to the people of Galatia in chapter 2. He said this, "I've been crucified with Messiah, and it's no longer I who live, but Messiah lives in me. And the life which I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself up for me." Let me ask you, what do you think about all this? You have an opinion, you have thoughts, you have knockbacks, or Bob, you're out of line, or opinions. We welcome opinions. So feel free to write me back on wherever you're getting podcasts, on Buzzsprout, where we hit 5,000 downloads this week. We had our 100th, that's pretty great, our 100th episode last week. Pretty cool. Maybe you want to write there on Spotify or Apple or iHeart, wherever you're listening. Or you can write to me the old-fashioned way. Email bobmendo@aol.com. Feel free to write and tell me what you're thinking, questions you have, arguments you have, guests you would like to see or hear. I'm going to interview Josh Gaddis again. He's written a new novel, and I want to make sure I get him on the pod and let you hear an update in his life. We'll see all the different folks again and again. You might remember Danny Cass. He was on the podcast back last November, December or so. Well, he passed away just a few months ago. So it's important that you meet these folk and get to know them and build a relationship if you'd like. Hey, have a great day, a great week. Until next week, then, when things seem bleak or uncertain, look up to God. He's in his heaven, and Bob's your uncle. Shalom.